Power of One. Today, it is my pleasure to speak with two dynamic women who have done amazing things in the city of Philadelphia and beyond. Please welcome to the show Ms. Shirley Dennis and Ms. Patricia A. Shirley Dennis, we'll begin with you. Please tell me a little bit about yourself and how your journey began with Abington Jefferson Hospital.
Well, Melany, I'm first and foremost a mother of three daughters and the widow of a gentleman that was so special to Abington Township, William Dennis. He was the first African-American president of the Board of Commissioners, but he was so much more than that. We called him a drum major for justice. So it began because of my husband's advocacy throughout the township and his work with the community and my work. And so at one point, I think in probably 1983, a gentleman by the name of, we called him Hank Haynes. And at that time, he was president of the Board of Commissioners of Abington Township. And he just said to me one day, Shirley, I want to talk to you. And I said, okay, Hank. And he said, listen, it's time. And I said, time for what? He says, it's time for you to come on the Abington Memorial Hospital board. And I knew right away what he meant. At that time, there were two African-American men on the hospital board, but there were no African-American women. And so I was the first African-American woman, and I was voted on to the board in 1984.
Was that the women's board?
No, this was the Board of Trustees of Abington Hospital, Abington Memorial Hospital. The women's board is part of the trustee board of Abington Memorial Hospital. And so there are several boards that at that time functioned as a part of the board. And I generally served on the foundation side of Abington Memorial Hospital, but you were all called trustees. So if you're a trustee of the hospital, you're a policymaker for the hospital. The four trustees came together, four African-American trustees at that point, three gentlemen and myself. We were concerned that Abington Hospital, which we saw as a treasure in our community, we were afraid that people would take it for granted, but we felt that we had a caring community and we could give our share to the hospital, so the hospital would understand that in the African-American community, we valued this hospital very greatly and we were willing to share what we have. So when we formed the Martin Luther King Committee, we first reached out to all of the African-American churches in the area and asked them if once a year they would give their benevolent fund collection on a given Sunday during Black History Month to Abington Memorial Hospital to increase support and care for our underserved community. And the churches went further than that. Most of them asked for envelopes for their membership as well as the church's composite gift. And so we ended up the very first time that we were trying to raise maybe $2,000 or $3,000, we raised more than $6,000. So by the time the auxiliary was founded, we were already used to fundraising for the hospital, not just volunteering our time, but also fundraising for the hospital.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Ms. Patricia Payne, please tell me a little bit about yourself and how you became associated with Abington Hospital.
I first began volunteering when I lived in West Oak Lane. I took the opportunity whenever I could to volunteer at nonprofit organizations where we would raise funds to help those who were in need. So we lived in West Oak Lane for 35 years, and then I began to look for my dream home. and we ended up in Willow Grove. So before coming to Willow Grove and retiring, I thought I'm going to give up volunteering for so many boards. But when I came to Willow Grove and saw the opportunity to continue to volunteer, I was blessed to know Shirley and Bill. And she was the one who told me about, let me know about Abington Hospital being the treasure in the community. And in addition to that, I got an email or snail mail to invite me to join the trustee board. So I knew at that point who did it. And it was Shirley. And I was accepted to be on the trustee board for a tenure of 4 years. Again, volunteering in the community has always been something soft in my heart.
So, Ms. Dennis, you made history once, and then in 2002, you were given the opportunity to make history yet again at Abington Hospital. Please share how that vision came to light and how you selected some women to further that vision.
Yes, this is another story that I love telling. I love telling the Martin Luther King story in reference to the hospital, and I love telling the story about the founding of the first African American Women's Auxiliary, because as with anything new, there's going to be controversy. Everybody's not going to always agree when you want to go and do something different. At a Martin Luther King committee meeting in 2002, the women's board leadership of that time came to our committee, and the committee was diverse in its representation. And they came to our committee and they said, we want to get more African American women involved with the work of the Women's Board for Abington Hospital, and we would like the help of the Martin Luther King Committee. And so my reaction was, oh boy, this is going to be an opportunity to get a lot more of the prominent, wonderful women that I know that are doing all kind of great things involved with the hospital. And to my surprise, some people didn't know, in their heart of hearts, they kind of expressed this feeling that they weren't sure that African American women in and around the hospital really would fit in well with the other women that were active with the Women's Board. And I think that I think their thinking was around the fact that we live in a prosperous community. We live in a well-educated community. We live in an overwhelmingly white community. And so they were questioning whether there were African-American women who could easily fit into that environment. And so after a few people spoke, I just said, listen, I know plenty of African-American women that are well versed in volunteerism, that have a lot of skills, that are well educated, that could come in and be an asset for Abington Hospital, and I will get a group of women together. And that's how I took on this challenge, and as you have kindly said, got the opportunity to make history. And so the first two women I thought about getting involved were the two Black women that, since I had come on the Abington Hospital Board of Trustees, had also come on the Board of Trustees by this time. The first one that I thought about, of course, was my dear friend, Patricia Payne. You can tell we really like each other. We have a mutual admiration society. And then the other African-American woman that was on the Board of Trustees at that time was Dr. Dontina Jackson, who was an educator in the Cheltenham School District. And her family were outgoing givers and activists and people who were very knowledgeable about how to do things. So they were my first two people I asked, would they join me in trying to figure out how we want to put such a organization together. And then the other two women were not involved with the hospital at that time, but were very well known and prominent in their own right. One was Melissa Dennis, who had just retired as an administrator with the Montgomery County Human Services Program. And the other was Gladys Harvey, who was a well-known broadcaster on behalf of Salem Baptist Church. I asked those two also, and the five of us came together and decided what we wanted to do. And we didn't have a name for the organization at that point, but we did know that we could each ask countless numbers of women, but we agreed that each of us would ask 5 women. And so on August 10th of 2002, we had a meeting at Melissa's home. And I like to always say that Melissa invited more than 5 women because 37 women showed up.
That's awesome. So Ms. Payne, when you received a call from, I'm going to say, your mentor, did you understand the importance and the history that you also were making? And did you understand the positive influence that you would have on so many young African-American women?
Yes, it was an honor to be asked. And the understanding was I did research on how long the Women's Board had been in existence. And through the research, if we looked at all the pictures and all the activities, there was an absence of African-American women. So I thought it as a wonderful way for the group to explore this exciting idea with Shirley Dennis, and knowing that it could be just a great opportunity for Abington Hospital to know that there are women, African-American women, that we can be as much value as the other women on the Women's Board.
So your first meeting, you had 37 African-American women. How many members are there currently in the Dickens Auxiliary?
The membership now, would you believe, if we had a bell, bing, 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 we're up to about 100 members, of which there are many of the women who have been with the auxiliary since its founding. Oh. And other women have been as long, not as long, but continue to value the organization as one of the many organizations in the community that serve Abington Hospital and beyond.
That's amazing. So both of you can speak to this. How did the name Helen O. Dickens come forth? And what is the mission of the auxiliary?
It's very important to know that when we had an opportunity at this meeting to name the auxiliary after someone that many of us admired, and we were working in the medical field as volunteers in setting this organization up, we took advantage of knowing about Dr. Helen O. Dickens, who at that time was probably the best known and the most revered African-American OB/GYN in the Philadelphia region. She was extremely well known. She had a large practice. She was active at Payne. She had encouraged women through the years to take care of their health, and she was just special. And so when Gladys Harvey, who agreed to bring names to us for consideration, so when we got to that part of the meeting and Gladys Harvey said, Well, one of the names I'd like to put forward is Dr. Helen O. Dickens. There was just a visible response of a joy from so many of the women in the room. I will tell you, she was my first GYN, and so I was all for it. And others said, well, she was my mother's OB because she delivered me. And so it was just wonderful, the response from those 37 women around the idea of naming our auxiliary after Dr. Helen O. Dickens was so overwhelming. I don't even remember, maybe Pat does, but I don't even remember whether we heard any other names. I know we didn't have to do any kind of voting. The response was so overwhelming. One of the things we had learned when the committee wanted to set up the Martin Luther King Committee, when there is surviving family, you must get permission. So as soon as Gladys knew that we wanted to name our auxiliary after Dr. Dickens, then she said, well, okay, I'll tell my grandson-in-law, Dr. Harris, to get in touch with her daughter, with Dr. Dickens' daughter, Dr. June Brown, and see if it's okay. And Dr. Brown was very pleased, and we brought her to a meeting, I think our second year, to honor her and her work in the medical field and to thank her for letting us honor her mother over these last 20 years.
Can you please tell me about the mission of the Dickens Auxiliary?
Well, the mission of the auxiliary is to first serve as advocates for the hospital, getting to know the hospital and wanting to share outside of the hospital when we know things are this and some people say things are that. And the other one was, as mentioned throughout this conversation, is to raise funds for different agencies throughout the community and for Abington Hospital.
Awesome. So there's
serve as an ambassador too.
Okay.
Serve as an ambassador for the hospital.
So there's something extremely exciting coming up. And Ms. Payne, can you tell us about that?
Yes, the excitement that's coming up is we are having a 20th celebration to celebrate the 20 years of the Dr. Helen O. Dickens Auxiliary. And this celebration is for our members to reflect. And our theme is looking back and moving forward on how we began and how we will move forward to continue the legacy of the Dr. Helen O. Dickens Auxiliary. And we decided to have a 3-part celebration. 2 of them will be fundraisers, but the one that we are having on August 13th is the real celebration for the members. So we're celebrating ourselves and all of the wonderful work that we have done in 20 years.
That's awesome. So you said you're having 2 fundraisers. Really quickly, tell the viewers how they can make donations to the Helen Dickens Auxiliary and what will their funds be applied to?
Well, one of the fundraisers we just had earlier in the year, it was a raffle to have a 3-night stay in Atlantic City, and that went very well. Our goal was raised. And in October, there's going to be another fundraiser to celebrate how we contribute to different organizations in the community. And I think this one coming up is one of the organizations that will deal with babies in a particular organization. And so what we asked, you can go online to the Women's Board link and you will see all of the activities that are coming up. And the one in October is listed now. I don't have all the particulars, but please just go on to the Women's Board at Jefferson Abington Hospital, and you will see all of the activities. And there are many that you can particularly benefit in the hospital and in the community.
So can someone just give to the Dickens Auxiliary without attending any fundraisers? Can someone make donations on the website?
Yeah, there is a link for the auxiliaries under the Women's Board.
Okay, that sounds good. Ms. Shirley Dennis and Ms. Patricia Payne, I thank you for who you are. I thank you for all of your hard work and dedication in making a positive way for young African-American girls just like myself. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. It is with great joy that I speak with Ms. Shirley Dennis and I speak with Ms. Patricia Payne. I stand on the shoulders of my mother, who is Patricia Payne, and Ms. Patricia Payne stood on the shoulders of Ms. Shirley Dennis. We are making a difference, a positive difference in the lives of so many, and you can make that positive difference also. Remember, the power of one starts with you. Peace and blessing.